Google search engine is like the most sophisticated system humanity ever built. It's just like insane. But on the other hand, I think there is like certain things that can be done better. Like specifically, you can save a lot of time when you don't have to like sift through like 10 links and kind of like do a lot of manual work yourself. Like if you just have a question, you just want to get an answer. And then you can imagine in the future, this is going to evolve into much more sophisticated workflows and pipelines where you can like gonna give those things tasks rather than just like simple questions, and they're gonna do like work for you.
Denis Yarats, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So you are the Chief Technology Officer at Perplexity.ai, one of the fastest growing AI startups today. So something I want to know about here, I think Perplexity was first launched in August 2022, if I'm not mistaken. How has it been like being on this rocket ship over the past, couple of years at this point?
Yeah, it's been definitely very exciting. It's kind of I wouldn't say it's a work. It's more like lifestyle. Like but it takes a lot of time. It's that's why I say it's like a lifestyle. But it's very exciting. So it's like every day you wake up and there's like something new. There's like our Slack is always buzzing. So super cool. I haven't had this experience before, so I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, it must be very interesting being at the center of a really big moment in the technology space, right? And I think we can jump right into that. I think I want to first talk about what makes Perplexity different from many of the other platforms we see today. And what I really appreciate about using Perplexity, I'm a Perplexity user myself, is that you can see the thoughtfulness put into making sure that any answer that is provided is truthful. There are citations, it's not biased. So maybe as someone who's overseeing the technology aspect of things in Perplexity, what goes into making sure every answer I get when I type in a query on Perplexity is as truthful and as relevant as possible?
Yeah, so we kind of Arvind and I we come from academic background, so I think sort of like citing when we write papers, like citing stuff is very natural things for us. And when we started, we kind of like very quickly realized this is going to be in this like LLM world, this is going to be very essential component because and especially in the day of in time we live in right now, there's like a lot of like misinformation, and it's kind of like very hard to trust what you read. So that's why this is probably one of the most like fundamental aspects of our product, and something we focus a lot on. In terms of like technologies, it's definitely a very hard problem to solve. I think it requires like a lot of coordination across like multiple teams, multiple technologies, and such. But more than anything, I think it has to be like a mindset of the entire company. It's just basically if there's only like few things we can focus on, this is going to be the very first thing that we're going to be focused on. Like speed and accuracy, I think is essential. And from the get go, we kind of like organized ourselves. So like we decided that we're not going to be too spread around, so we're just going to focus on a few things, but we'll try to do as best as we can. And turns out as we like learn more about this problem is like very challenging, and there's like a lot of things to do. In terms of like technology, I think it's basically a combination of kind of like having very good models, having very good like ranking system, like the search engine and sort of like, and then like trying to make sure that the information that you retrieve from the web pages is they're like don't contribute. You kind of like take if there's like multiple sources, maybe like tell them like different things, so you have to figure out like who contributes what. So kind of maybe if it's hard to resolve it, then you can kind of like give like several opinions about this. So you don't want to be biased. You definitely want to make sure that you cover all the ground, and then like essentially have the models that can like not only generate the answer, but also like self-verify and see if they like made a mistake or not. And if they made a mistake, then kind of like see how things can be improved. And all of this, like the most important part is just like to establish like data flywheel. and sort of like learn from those mistakes, and then like keep getting better.
Yeah, and you alluded to this earlier when when you were talking about kind of the principles that you guys wanted to focus on when building Perplexity. I want to kind of deep dive into that a bit more. Since the advent of ChatGPT, I think kind of ChatGPT really mainstreamed chatbots or kind of search AI assisted search engines in a lot of ways. Um, you know, there's been quite a few players in the space, right? But I think not a lot of people have done as good as you guys have, and kind of one, building that flywheel, getting so many users, being able to kind of put yourself on the map as kind of a main player in the space. Maybe when you think about kind of the Perplexity culture, kind of the things that you focused on, um, what are the main principles that you've been focusing on to make sure that you're building a differentiated product that works versus the rest of the space?
Yeah. I think there's like several key factors. In terms of product itself, I think we wanted to make sure from the beginning that it's very simple, it's very easy to use, it's very intuitive. That's why kind of we also realized like from the beginning, just like chat interface is not what we want to have, and we kind of like spend a bunch of time like thinking what it needs to be, and sort of like from this point of view, even from that time, we kind of like decided this is going to be one of the differentiating factor. The other one was simplicity and quality. It's like the problem is just that, like in general, like problem search, I feel like it's AI complete, right? So like it's very hard to, and like Google is obviously by far like the best search engine so far, but still there's like certain things that it cannot do. And because this problem is like so monumental, we just decided, okay, so let's just like try to solve this like small piece, but like try to do this as best as possible, and see how long it's going to take and like where it's going to take us. And yeah, it turns out it's actually a much harder problem than we even initially anticipated. And kind of like preserving still that mindset that let's just do the simplest things but do them right and high quality, and just keep doing that. And I think instead of like trying to maybe go after like many things at the same time, and then like doing them maybe like not as good, and because of that, we sort of like, okay, so we decided like what kind of like team we need to assemble. We definitely need to have people who care deeply about those things. So like care a lot about like a very good infrastructure, care a lot moving fast, care a lot like building things with the high quality and like things that work fast. Because essentially, I think like Google told everybody that like you have to get instant answers. It's just like you cannot wait. And if we were like, especially like now that we launched enterprise, if we want to like save people time, we not only have to provide them very high quality answers, but also do this very fast. And so doing those things together, it's very challenging. So yeah, essentially, I think kind of doing small things, but like very deep, like go very deep there, and like very high quality is just like what we're trying to do. And I think we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned here doing small things, but doing them quickly, doing them high quality. And I think kind of the culture of fast iteration and operational excellence at Perplexity even, bleeds out on, when looking at Perplexity, as an outsider myself, I'm looking at, the velocity of features being added, the velocity of new releases, new launches. You mentioned Enterprise. Enterprise was launched yesterday. Maybe walk us through that culture of excellence a bit more in depth. And maybe what can you attribute as the key success factor behind this culture of excellence, right? When you're building out the team you're hiring. Yeah, walk me through that as a leader of the organization.
Yeah, so I think it was very important from the beginning. Is just like to get like very strong foundation, like core team. So we, it's like Arvin and I started, and then like we were so happy to have Johnny, whom I used to work before, and he's like this like legendary a coder, as he was like a world champion. So this guy just does everything very fast and very high quality, and so we kind of like decided, okay, so let's just try hire slowly, but like try to focus on very good people. And so like from the beginning, I think like until maybe when we hired 10 or 15 people, we were actually had this trial periods. So it wasn't like a normal interview. We would like, invite somebody. They would work with us for like a week or like sometimes even longer. And then we just, see if how, because it's like one thing is to do interviews, like you can miss certain things, but like when you work with a person for like several days, it's like very clear. And that, even though it was like a time consuming, I think it turns out to be a great idea because like we were definitely able to like get those like first 10 people who are, like very trustable, like they're aligned on the mission, very fast, very strong. And, the reasoning behind that was just, okay, so like those 10 people then kind of bring like, each of them is going to bring like 10 more people. And so like if you need to have like a solid foundation, and that's like long term basically like paid off because those people now like the new people coming, this is like already integrated in our culture. We have to move fast. There is like you if you can do something today, you have to do it today rather than like doing it tomorrow, like next week, and sort of like have this insane pace and momentum is just something and like basically this is like one of the things that I like right now spend a lot of time kind of like maintaining is just like how do we, as we get bigger, how do we don't lose this momentum? Because it's a nature, like if you stop moving, things slowing down. Yeah, you have to start, you have to like continue pushing. In my mind, the most successful companies is just like those who like were able to prolong this like lose of velocity as long as possible, and then because eventually it's going to happen. Like once you become like a super big company, it's just like organizational things become very hard, and so but yeah, we're trying to sort of like push it as far as possible.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I want to kind of expand here on, like, because I definitely agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, having a relentless space is absolutely essential when it comes to like building out a company successful as Perplexity, right? And you mentioned here bringing in people on the first week and having a trial period, right? Well, what is an evaluation of success after a week? Is it like time to value and driving like iteration on the product within the first week? Is this something you look for on the first week?
I mean, basically, it was just like very the few things we kind of like paid attention to is first of all like alignment and mission driven. So it's like can these people I figure out like ambiguity. So you just like give them like high level sort of like goal or task, and you see if they can execute on it. But honestly, it's like surprisingly very easy to, when you work with somebody, you can like literally sit next to them and like see how they write code, right? Or like when you talk to them, like you go for lunch and you just talk to them, it's like it actually does not take a lot of time to understand if you sort of like want to work with this person for a long time or not, and if they're like capable or not. Like the best people, you like literally best people I can tell like in 30 minutes. It's just okay. So this person is very good. So we should get him. But like it's usually, and it's kind of like like the same story like true on the other end. Like it's also like relatively quickly you can say that maybe it's not the right person for whatever reason. But usually the way it worked, like, okay, because we were like, at the time we were like, okay, so a very small company that didn't have like anything. So maybe first like day you spend kind of like understanding if you want to hire them, but like the rest couple of days you're trying to sell them if you found somebody good that you really want to hire, like, but obviously those people have a lot of options. And so you're like trying to figure out like how do we convince them to join us? So that was also like a big part of that process. So not only sort of like assess people, but like also try to sell them and join us.
Yeah, and on that selling aspect, right? Like, there's not a lot of people on this planet who can build large language models or build systems that, are operate at the scale of a Perplexity, right? So maybe how have you seen are like effective models for competing with talent when you're competing for like with the Metas and with the Open AIs and with the Googles of the world? What is the differentiating factor for joining Perplexity when you have this conversation?
Yeah, it's definitely very tough. I think like it's for whatever reason, those companies like more established, they they have like bigger clusters.
They have compute.
They
Yeah.
have compute, right? So it's and to be honest, they have like way more resources that we have, so they can like literally pay as much as they want, which is something we cannot afford. So like the strategy was to, and I think like uh, kind of like trying to discover people who are maybe not already like established, like like a research scientist at Fair, right? So like, okay, so yeah, probably if you try to get somebody like that, they're like going to be very expensive. They already have like some ideas of what they want to do. Like maybe they're not going to be very aligned. But like try to discover this people who have a lot of potential. Yes, maybe they'll like require a little bit of like teaching and learning, but like who can very quickly, like within a couple of months, ramp up and like actually be like very productive. And so that worked super well for us. And so maybe like getting people from like a little bit like adjacent fields who like maybe like strong engineer or have like a very strong like math background or like competitive coding experience, and then to just like teach them. So we, like Armin and I and like a few other people on the team kind of like used to be like research scientists as well. So we have experience with this models, and so we can can teach them, and but they have like other skills, and they and like the most important, they have like desire to learn and kind of ramp up in that field. So which is honestly very important, and that's how we've been doing things. Obviously, at some point, you also need to get like experienced people. I think now we can actually, because we got like a little bit more like bigger, like have more resources, a little bit more recognizable brand. So then we can try to get like a little bit more senior people, more experienced. But yeah, I think it's still very tough to like compete with OpenAI and places like that, because yeah, they just attract all the best people.
Yeah, and speaking of talent here, when we were talking about kind of technical talent, something you alluded to is, taking in strong engineering folks and trying to give them AI chops, right? You find that has been like a successful model in being able to kind of immediately upskill people on AI and get them up to speed on kind of the space, right? Like maybe I'll reframe the question: is you value more research skills or technical engineering skills at the beginning when you're looking for an early hire?
Yeah, I think it's basically from my experience and from like working with many, like famous researchers in AI. I think like usually best people who they're both good researchers and engineers. Like it's very rarely where like you have a strong research scientist who doesn't know like how to code. And so that's why kind of like I feel like the best people, they can do both very successfully, and then like they can do one. They can like do engineering very good, but then they can also do like some research. It's more about I guess like just in general like intellect, and so that's why like especially with like transformers, yeah, there's like lots of secrets, but you can kind of like teach people to how to do this, and like in the end a lot of it is still like a very hardcore like engineering, like especially once you start training this like large models. So it's a lot about like distributed system and stuff like that. Obviously you need to know like some fundamentals of machine learning as well, but yeah, those things is not rocket science.
And definitely a lot of people are tuning in right now who are aspiring like AI engineers or want to work in AI. Where do you what are the technical skills that you recommend people to like develop at the beginning, right? And what are the cultural traits that you want them to have, right? When if they want to break into the field.
Yeah. I think like basically you definitely have to be very comfortable with coding. I think you have to, like Python, at least like knowing Python, like, ideally like eventually like C++ and stuff like that. But I think it's more importantly is to have this like curiosity and like desire to learn things and just be very, very proactive, because even right now there's a lot of information and very useful information on the internet. There's like many people you can talk to. and learn. It's just like trying things quickly, like iterating. I think it's very important to very quickly iterate and like kind of like get results instead of like that's how you learn the fastest, like trying things yourself rather than, okay, so even like, yeah, you can read like a paper and there's like, oh, this makes sense. But like if you haven't implemented yourself, you like honestly probably not going to have like very deep understanding of things, and kind of like trying those ideas quickly, I think is very important. So and that's why it's very important to be like a good engineer, so you can like implement things very quickly and then like test hypotheses and see if things are going well. And I think the other very important quality is kind of like to challenge is not be afraid of like sort of like things that that seems like impossible, like before you say, oh yeah, it's like Google is like it's impossible to build Google, but like you don't actually need to build Google, you have to build something else. And so a lot of people who maybe have a lot of experience, there is this I feel like they're like maybe less flexible in thinking is just like some things are possible and some things are not, because they're like, okay, so let's say they work at Google, they're like, no, like how complicated it is, like how much infrastructure Google has in there. Like you talk to them and they're like, say, oh, this is like impossible to build, right? But then, it's clearly possible, right? Like OpenAI, for example, showed that you can do something very cool without like having Google infrastructure. And so it's kind of like be flexible, or like have this trade-off where you have like necessary skills, but you're also not too rigid to try new ideas and kind of like let the past go. Like,
yeah, it's like pardon my word here, but like it's a healthy dose of being delusional a bit and wanting to like break through kind of that barrier. That's very important. You see this also with like world-class athletes, for example. Like you need to be a bit delusional to think that you can be the best in the world at something, right?
I think it's very important. Yeah, like I remember like clearly early on in Perplexity, like thinking to myself, oh, dude, like when we're especially thinking about like building search engine, it's just like, yeah, this seems like kind of like an impossible task. But like, but if you sort of like have this mindset from the beginning, then you just like probably we shouldn't even start. But luckily we didn't have that mindset.
Yeah. And I want to talk to you about search, but before that, I also want to ask you a question about how, your career trajectory had changed. You mentioned you were from research, you worked at Meta in research. And you also worked at Quora. What was the biggest challenge for you transitioning from research to now, like leading a large scale technical organization at one of the biggest AI startups on the planet? Like, yeah, walk me through kind of the leadership experience that you gained, what you had to learn. I'd love to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, I did like this like two transitions. So initially I started as like engineer. So I actually work at Bing and then Quora. So I was like engineer, but then like 2000, I did like a lot of like machine learning and ranking. But then in 2015, when I first went to NeurIPS, the biggest machine learning conference, I kind of like got very convinced right away that deep learning is the way to go, and it's going to be like the biggest thing. And so I started, I joined Facebook AI Research as an engineer initially, and then like go get my PhD and like converted to scientist. And so that's why I had like very strong like engineering background, and I was like able to just learn like like we were able to like like if there's like any algorithm or like training system needs to be implemented, I was able to do this like relatively quickly, and then kind of learn from that. And then I through like PhD and being a research scientist, I gained like more high level sort of like problem setting, problem thinking skills. And so now I basically had like a very deep understanding like how it needs to be done, but also what needs to be done. And so that now that basically like helped like tremendously like creating Perplexity and like running it, because early on I was able to but basically me and John was kind of like build everything from the beginning, right? But then also like as we start bringing in people, I was also were able to like provide them like guidance and like trying to sort of like organize them together and like trying to set like directions and goals, and sort of like if they struck with like some technical problems, then I can also like unblock them. So I think that kind of like, at least for me, it was very important to not only be like high level and kind of like know, like how things in theory should work, but also if needed to just go and like implement them myself or like help people to do that.
Yeah, definitely that's super helpful. But maybe walk me through as well, kind of the people management side of things as well. Like that, I'm sure like that's like past few years have stretched your capabilities on that front as well. Like I can imagine being from an IC, like a researcher to a CTO as well.
Yeah. So this actually, surprisingly, we a very flat organization right now. So there is literally no engineer managers yet. Actually, we just hired like one person like a week ago. Before that was basically, yeah, I have like half of the company reports, and then Johnny has the other company reports, and it's kind of like more not a manager but like a tech lead type of thing. So we like very rarely talk about like and that was like very important. I think like that what happened as we hired this like people, that this process, the interview process that we had, where we had like very aligned people who basically don't need a lot of like babysitting or anything like that. They're like excited to work. And that's why we basically, and it's kind of like wild now that I think about it, that for like almost 2 years now, we haven't have to deal with this. So like there is no time wasted on like people management, like talking about like things or like career growth, like what should I do like to this. We just work. We just like we have like exciting projects, and we just like trying to do our best to get there. And that's kind of it's been. I think it's very unusual. For example, when I was at Quora, I think it was I joined there when there was like 30 or 40 people, and at that time there was already like at least 7, 8 managers, or like at least we now like I feel like how many people, like 65 people I think. We don't have managers yet. Like we only got one. So that was very unusual, I would say, but which helped us to move very fast.
Yeah, that's pretty great insight. It's pretty interesting also seeing, you know, it's a new technology paradigm, but it's also you can see kind of like the DNA of a lot of, I would say, old school tech companies kind of bringing in here. So maybe shifting gears, you mentioned here competing with Google, like right, being able to have that mindset of like we can compete with Google, right? So the main competitor of Perplexity is not necessarily ChatGPT; it is Google, right? Maybe my question first, setting the stage, is why do you think search needs disrupting?
Yeah. So I mean, it basically even right. So there are like few things happen, right? I think like from the beginning, Google had like very brilliant idea, like PageRank and stuff like that. So like something that really values high quality information, something that is very helpful. I mean, it still is, but like you've seen over the last 10 years, maybe more, the system got gamified a little bit, and mostly through like ads and SEO. And so like people kind of like figure out how to like break original page rank. And that's why, I mean, Google is still like tremendously useful. I think it's still going to be very useful, and uh, throughout the years. I think it's an amazing system that they build. Like to me, like probably Google search engine is like the most sophisticated system humanity ever built. It's just like insane. But also on the other hand, I think there is like certain things that can be done better. Like specifically, you can save a lot of time when you don't have to like sift through like 10 links and kind of like do a lot of manual work yourself. Like if you just have a question, you just want to get an answer, and then you can imagine in the future this is going to evolve into much more sophisticated workflows and pipelines, where you can like going to give those things tasks rather than just like simple questions, and they're going to do like work for you. And I think this is I wouldn't say it's like necessarily directly competing with Google. I think it's just like a different market. And I think like people still even right now, like ChatGPT happened, yeah, kind of like got a lot of traffic, right? But then Google not necessarily lost any traffic itself, right? They just so they just created a new traffic, right? And so people still, for example, we see people use Perplexity, people use ChatGPT, people use Google. It's just like all different tasks, but because people can do like things much faster now, they still have like time to do all of this stuff. And that's kind of like, we trying to be basically like complementary. We kind of like trying to create a segment where we can do like provide like best in class experience, and then hopefully this segment is going to be large enough where you can create a successful company.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you're mentioning here kind of the emergence of a new category of products, right? And right now I would say like a lot of AI search engines, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Perplexity included, is mostly synthesis, right? Like we provide you 10 links, let's say they're synthesized, here are the citations, etc. But you hinted at this, is that there is a future where there's a lot more agentic use cases to explore, right? I can easily see a future like, hey, I have a question about Python or C++, and then you have like an AI that shows you a lesson like in real life, and able to kind of give you like let you execute a code, right? Like this is kind of where education, right? So I'm giving you an education use case, but then there's also like book me a flight, something along those lines, right? How do you see the future of agentic use cases in search? And when do you think that will happen, right? I assume you guys are working on it already.
Yeah, I think it's definitely right. So this is something that's definitely going to happen. I think it's already sort of like undergo. I feel like technology is not quite there yet, but it doesn't mean you should not be preparing for it, because it's definitely happening. And that's kind of like why we don't have to rebuild Google search engine, because this is not exactly what we need. We need like something different, like something that are actually gonna support those new use cases, those like agents. And it's like not necessarily like having ranking system that like ranks like top 10 results, because that's not going to be useful. And that's why it kind of like actually like necessitates like different infrastructure, different system, and something that we definitely working on. I mean, I feel like it's definitely going to happen. I think like there is, and the most important thing is just like there's like so much to do. Like as you mentioned, you can book flights, you can do like lessons, you can do like tasks. So that's why I don't think there's going to be like one winner take all. Is just like a lot of this is going to be product differentiation, like something that's why we very confident we have like a very good shot. Like I mean, like OpenAI is going to be there, like Google is going to be there, but yeah, hopefully we're also going to be there as well.
And another kind of question that's always like, at least in my mind, that I always think about when it comes to search and AI search, is that search represents a large amount of the internet's GDP, right? If you disrupt the business model of search, this has really large scale cascading effects on publishers. You mentioned here kind of, we talked about flight bookings, right? Expedia's business model will radically change uh, if search is no longer the way we're used to it, right? Maybe for publishers, creators, services, how do you imagine the business model will look like if AI assisted search becomes the norm, right? And how do you see that changing over time?
Yeah, this is definitely things will have to change there. I think like there has to be like some figure out like some monetization strategies where those can like right now, like usually how it's happened, like Google, for example, sends traffic to you, right? So and that's fine, but like we like Perplexity right now also like sends traffic. It's not as much as Google, but I think like at least like 10% of our requests result into people clicking links. But I think like the key observation here is just like each click is not equal in terms of like the intent, right? So like Google, in Google, you can just like find something, you click and then you bounce back because it's just like not relevant. So here, if you click, intent is like so much higher. And so if you kind of like weight by intent, so maybe it's not as much of a drop off as currently. And so these things I think it's going to be that's how you can kind of like reward publishers and stuff like that, and other actors. But also I think there is I mean, there could be like different other models where you can kind of like work together. You content generation is still going to be very important, I think. And so I guess we'll have to make sure that we can figure out the ways to work with those companies, with those providers, and so everybody's happy.
Think about, for example, the state of media and the state of journalism. Like the business model there is already shifting, right, for the past 10 years, and it will continuously shift, especially with this technology. And maybe as we're talking about AI, right, close out our conversation, I want to shift a bit gears and talk about kind of how you see the large language model space and kind of the generative AI space in general, like evolving, right? And, Perplexity lets you choose which model to use, right? There's an LLM interface, whether it's an open source model, closed source model. This week we saw releases of three big, I think, open source model, 5.3, Llama 3, and now Arctic from Snowflake, right? Maybe walk me through how you look at the open source versus closed source AI kind of debate, right? And how you think about it, and what do you think kind of how the future of AI will play out here?
I basically think I'm a big proponent of open source. I think it's I think it has a lot of benefits, and I like literally see why like Meta is so eager to do this, because it just many people don't realize it. I think like setting up the standard and sort of like just like having the one architecture that everybody's using, it's very massive. And yes, some of the other arguments is just like the community is just like so much larger than any company, right? And like people are so excited about, so they can like if they can figure out like a trick or two where you can save inference or like discover like some bugs in the model, I think it's just like super valuable to the original creator of those models. I think in terms of like how all of this is going to play out, I feel like right now we're still like in very, very early stages of this, where people kind of like, oh, they know like what is the difference between like GPT-4 and like Claude or like Llama. So like ultimately, as once you go to very big market, like most of the people just not going to know like what it is. What are you talking about? So that's why like the only thing is, which something we focus a lot, is kind of like designing a product where people don't even need to know like what kind of like model you're using, as long as it gets the job done, right? And with this, that's why there is so much opportunity to like leverage different models, like both open source and closed source, and just like create a system that can symbiote those things like together, and like they can work like very efficiently together and like quickly. And in terms of like how it's going to go, I think, right, so like different models are going to require like different compute considerations for inference, and I think different tasks require like different compute considerations as well, and so you will have to figure out like how to utilize resources efficiently. And then like if somebody needs more compute for their task, then I think you can also like figure out like a way to sort of like offer that as a service. Like if somebody needs like very quick answers, like summarizations, you can use like a very small model. But if somebody needs like super expensive like agentic behavior, or like do like some complicated stuff, then I think maybe it's going to be like cost a little bit more.
Interesting. So you're alluding to this, and I think that kind of connects to my next question, right? Because you're like different tasks, like, and different tasks require kind of, you can say, like different raw intelligence capabilities within LLMs, right? And when we're looking at kind of the next generation of LLMs, right, I often think about, there's kind of different levers at the community's disposal here, like better data quality, larger amount of compute, more data, right, scaling parameter size. What do you think will need to be true to get significant stepwise improvements in the performance of today's like state-of-the-art LLMs?
I think it's basically figuring out like synthetic data. I think that's probably going to be the biggest one. I feel like already like maybe pre-training is passing the point where pre-training cost is actually not the biggest cost, but like synthetic data generation is the biggest cost. And I think it's definitely going to be true in the next generation of the models. And so then you kind of like, because you have like data generation, which is like super expensive. That's why like inference is going to be super expensive. Then you do like pre-training. It's like kind of like amortizing things together. And then, so like trying to figure out like synthetic data and self-pay, I feel like that's, if you can enable this thing, this is kind of like ultimately basically going to be like unlimited amount of intelligence, but it's clearly very difficult to do. And I think like a lot of people trying, so I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and we're already seeing kind of the precursors of that to a certain extent, like 5.3 released this week, right? A really small model, but trained on synthetic data,
Yeah.
almost
So
keeping
like, yeah, for
3.5
example,
performance.
yeah,
Yeah.
like 5.3 is a very good example where pre-training compute is much lower than data generation compute.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And we've been talking about intelligence, but I think also an equally important, if not, but highly underrated, I would say, aspect of succeeding in building like a generative AI product like Perplexity, because it's not just like about calling the API and getting an answer, right? It's about a great user interface and user experience as well. Maybe walk us through some of the lessons that you've learned in building a great generative AI product, like that has excellent UI and UX? Like, what are kind of the UI UX principles that you've built around building generative AI products?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like it's very maybe underappreciative area where like people or whatever like UI is not important. You just like need to, but that's clearly not true. I think like our then like a lot of credit goes to our like designer Henry, who like kind of like from the beginning was kind of like, I guess I don't want, we shouldn't do chat interface, we should do something else. I think that was very important, and the more important thing is just like as this technology emerge, there is going to be a lot of room for something creative in the UI UX space. So and yeah, I'm super excited about it. But it is very important. I would say it's like super important to have a UI that is very intuitive, that is like pleasure to use, that kind of like fast, responsive. Yeah, I just like cannot stress this enough. But like unfortunately myself, I'm kind of like bad generator of UI, but I'm very good discriminator, so I can like tell if I like the UI or not, or UX or not. So that's kind of like but we have a very good people who can generate it as well.
Yeah, that's really great. And again, you talk about this as well, like, carrying a pleasant experience to use, but also like to get the best responses out of an LLM, right? Like I'm a firm proponent of the concept that good design will like eliminate the skill of good, like of this, the needing the skill of prompt engineering, right? Because if you have a great UI, you will always be able to get a good response. Maybe how do you see that as well? Like kind of the intersection of getting the best out of an LLM with great UX and UI.
Yeah. I feel like it's still, like LLM's getting better and better, but it's still like they're not ideal, and I think it's going to take some time. And that's why kind of like really thinking through how people are going to use LLM and how to minimize sort of like the amount of time where you unhappy with the result. So either like providing like some tools or kind of like UI elements that can eliminate those pain points. Yeah, it's very important. So I feel like that's why it's very important to sort of like have your product team and the AI team sort of like work as closely as possible and like brainstorm things together. So then, usually, this process should not be disconnected. Otherwise, you will not going to have like delightful product.
Denis, as we close out our chat, right? Maybe do you have any final call to action to share with the audience, predictions about the data space, AI space? Love to. Can I hear your final thoughts here?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I guess I cannot stress enough like how early we are in this journey. I think it feels like, even though it's been like almost 2 years since, I guess like 1.5 years since ChatGPT happened, but I feel like it was ages. But like on the other hand, it's also there is like so much more to come. And so yeah, I'm just like excited to like continue this journey and like see what things, and like excited for like different generations of the models, like see how can we solve the synthetic data problem. And yeah, the yeah it's very, I mean, I was like thinking to myself like, what else right now can you be doing that is going to be more fun than AI? And there is none.
That is awesome, 100%. Thank you so much, Dennis, for coming on Data Framed.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me, and that was a great chat to have.
Likewise.